So this video I'll be honing the engine. I'll be using the deglazer, so it's really deglazing the engine. So what's the difference between those two terms? Deglazing is just a really light sandpaper, if you will, just really light sanding. And honing is something that takes a little bit more metal off of it. And it usually refers to a more precise job, which I'll explain in just a second. So with cylinder bores, or cylinders, there's two different measurements, and that's the diameter, and the other is the outer round, which simply put is a measure of how oval the the cylinder actually is. So the idea is to try to make them as perfectly round as possible at the machine shop. But after the engine wears out, these are far from perfect. So there's a measure of how much is tolerable, how much ovalness is tolerable. And the way to measure that is you measure from one side to the other, the largest sides, and then you measure across the opposite sides at a perpendicular angle. So basically in a cross. And those two measurements should be as close as possible. In my case, and then here you have to check the manual. Every car is different. In my case, the maximum difference is 0.004 of an inch. So if the measurements are slightly different, that means that the diameter of the cylinder bore, it's slightly bigger, slightly smaller to one side, making it oval. And that's where the machine shop, people are always, oh, you got to take it to the machine shop, it's safe, or you can't fix it at home, or whatever. The only time that you really have to take it to the machine shop is if it's out of round. So the second measurement, which I said is the importance of equal importance, is the diameter. So let's say, and first going back to the outer round, just before I go into the actual diameter, the outer round is the piston. Although the cylinder bore, the cylinder is round, it's supposed to be perfectly round. The pistons aren't, and they're made slightly oval. And the reason being is that once they are hot, they expand and then they become round. Now, for an engine that's driven very small distances, just think of it this way: the cylinder, the piston, it only expands, it only becomes round once it gets hot. Now, if somebody drives the engine just short distances, let's say 10 minutes to get to work, 10 minutes to go back, then the cylinders, the bores don't have enough time to heat up, and then they remain oval, which will therefore cause more ovalness on the cylinder bore, because it's wearing out the cylinder bore. So in those engines, you might need to take it to the machine shop, because this tool, as you can see, it's flexible, it expands. So it's just following whatever surface is in there. If this surface was triangular or square, I could still put this in and it wouldn't make it round. Same here, if the cylinder bores are oval, this tool is just going to follow it. It's going to clean it and make the surfaces smooth, but not necessarily round. So smoothness is different than roundness. That's the point here. So this just serves to make it smooth, the honing, and that other tool, this tool here as well. Expanding type hone. I just broke off a little stone off of it. Very shitty built stone set here. The tool itself got some plastic parts. It feels like garbage. So watch out. I got this from Rock Auto. 99.99% of stuff from there is fine, but this tool here, I'd stay away from it. This was a mistake. So same for that. It just expands. It just serves to make it smooth. Now, there is a different kind of hone which is called a rigid hone, and you can also buy that from Rock Auto, but it costs over $150. So depending on the price that the machine shop gives me, if it's necessary, or gives you, it still might be worth to get the rigid type hone. Now the rigid type hone, it does not expand like that, or if it does, it expands evenly. So not like that there, it can expand all the sides. They're independent of each other, as you can see. If I squash one side more than the other, it's still possible to do that. Not with the rigid hone. So the rigid hone is going to expand to one size, and it's going to stay that size. So it's going to make the cylinder round. All right, and that's the big difference. I see a lot of people debating, and no, you got to take it to a machine shop. You can't do this, or you can't do that, or this serves to hone, and no, it won't, or whatever. So that's the big difference. And how do you know? Well, you got to measure it. If it's within what the manual says is acceptable, then that's acceptable. If it's not, then, well, you either can put thicker oil in, and you'll just use up more oil, or you'll take it to a machine shop or buy the rigid hone. But you got to measure these things before making any decision. That sort of explains what the diameter is. Now, if the pistons are normally driven by somebody conscious, somebody that waits for the car to warm up, to reach operating temperature, especially on these cast iron engines, you should wait at least 5 minutes before driving, at least till the temperature gets to, you know, somewhere. You should wait till it gets to operating temperature. That's the ideal. Let's say the owner does that, but he drove it for 400,000 kilometers. So wear is inevitable, right? No matter how well you maintain your engine, it's inevitable. But the wear is going to be even, so it's just going to be on the cylinder bore. It's just going to be, it's still going to stay round, but it's going to be a bigger round. It's going to increase in diameter. And if that's the case, which I'm hoping it is, then all we got to do is change the pistons and change the piston ring. So we go to an oversized piston and corresponding piston rings that are slightly larger, and then that's the same principle there. So I might still be able to use the standard, because like I said, once again, there is variation. There is a certain amount of number, there's a certain number of tolerance. In my case, it's 0.0006 to 0.0012 of an inch of tolerance, where I can, between the wall, and the key difference is the key measurement is the distance, or the space between the piston and the cylinder bore. And you actually got to either measure it and subtract the difference, or you can use a feeler gauge and tell the difference as well. So if it's within that acceptable range, you're not going to get any blow-by, which is gasoline or air mixture. Remember, this gets pressurized to a pretty high pressure, and if these surfaces aren't close enough and sealing properly, then you lose compression, and the gasoline air mixture is going to go in, instead of coming out through the exhaust and blowing up inside, it's just going to leak past the rings and go into the crankcase. So that's the key difference. And once again, there is quite a bit of variation. Once the surfaces become have more distance between them, they wear out, you increase the oil thickness. So there is a fair bit of variation there. So I think that pretty much covers it. Once again, there is roundness, and there is smoothness, and there is the diameter. Those three are the important surfaces, the important measurements, sorry. So what I'm just going to do here is, after the engine has worn out, it creates vertical lines because the pistons are going up and down, and the oil seeps in between there. Now when we're installing new rings, I want the surface to be slightly rough so that the rings can actually wear out on it and seat properly. Once again, the springs, the rings they're fairly springy, so, and there might not also be perfectly round. So the closest we can get these surfaces to meet each other, the least amount of distance between them, the better. So this here is what I'm trying to accomplish here. Yes, you got to move it down fast. And the interesting thing is that after you do this, you can actually see where I see one place here where there was a vertical line scratch, and I'm actually removing it. I don't want to remove a lot because I'm still planning on using standard pistons. Last one. So after I measure, now this cleans off all the junk, all the irregular surfaces, and makes it much smoother. And so that now I can measure it. So if I measure it and I find that one of them is slightly too small, then I'll just do some more honing and try to increase the diameter a little bit. Like I said, this is like a really fine sandpaper. You can spend hours and hours with 3000 grit sandpaper on paint, and you can spend hours and hours and it won't remove a lot at all. It will remove barely nothing. So this is sort of what this is doing. So I don't see any vertical lines anymore. I mean, there's a little bit, some really small sections, but not very small. You can't feel it. If you can feel it with your eyes closed, that's not good. If you can put your finger over it and not feel it, not find it with your eyes closed, and that's really good. That's fine. Just this is interesting. There's a different type of material here at the bottom. At the bottom. Hello, at the bottom. That's nice. Echo. Alright, so that's how you break the glaze, remove the glaze from an engine. Just finish this off, and that's the end of the video. There's a scratch on this cylinder here. I can see it. I can't feel it, but I can still see it. So it's just very light. Might do some more honing, depending on how much clearance I have. Like I said, I don't want to hold too much, but I doubt that this will remove a lot of material enough for me to worry about it. If you're using those stones, yeah, then you have to worry about it a little bit more.